Hello and welcome to an interesting video of mine. It's something a little bit different today. As you may be aware, or may not be, I've been experimenting with some O-gauge and I've picked up a few O-gauge locomotives. Now, this is a recent purchase of mine. It was in fact an eBay purchase. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to back it into shot. There we go. Now, this is an interesting and very unique locomotive in itself, in that it is in fact the Turbomotive. Now, for those who are unaware of what the Turbomotive was, it was based on the Princess, so it's very similar to the Princess, the LMS Princess locomotives. It shared the same chassis, the same tender, the same wheel arrangement. However, being the Turbomotive, it was driven in a very different way, in that rather than there being valve gear with the reciprocating motion of a piston, it was actually driven by a turbine. Now, a steam turbine, the steam is driven into one end and it pushes the turbine blades, generating the power. Now, the LMS decided to experiment with this, and this particular locomotive was the result. Now, I'll just tell you a little bit about this specific model. And now, it was actually an eBay purchase. I got it for a not too bad price, I won't say what, and it was sold as a non-runner, a bit of a spares and repairs job. Now, I've actually not done very much with it since purchasing it. I've fitted it with a DCC chip, but that was pretty much it. As soon as I got it, I figured I would put it on the track, put some power to it and see if she did move. And she did. And she actually runs really well. She's incredibly strong too. As it was sold as a spares and repairs job, there is a few details which are quite obvious when you first see it. The front buffer is missing. That's a very, very easy part to replace. In fact, I've already been in contact with the kit manufacturer, who's going to sort me with a pair of LMS style oval buffers. The other thing that was a problem with this when I initially purchased it was the drawbar had broken, so I couldn't actually connect to the tender and the locomotive itself. That wasn't too much of a problem to fix, in that I measured out some scrap brass, created 2 strips, sandwiched the strips together and soldered them, and drilled 2 holes which fit the exact size of the screws underneath, the screws which hold them together, which is why when you move the engine, there's no sort of give in it, it just goes with it. Whereas normally there would be a little bit of movement backwards and forwards. Now, I have actually had this open and had a bit of a play with the inside. I did try fitting it with a flywheel, but the experiment with that wasn't very successful. It created a bit of a lag in terms of it actually moving, and it didn't really help with the performance of the engine. I think it put too much strain on the motor, really. But the actual engine itself, it can pull a fair weight. I mean, I've only experimented with pulling what I have, and it can actually pull all my other locomotives without any power going to them. Now, there are a few things to note with this as well. There is all other unfinished parts which I'll need to fabricate, and I'll need to get some new bits and pieces ordered. Now the other thing, I've mentioned the buffer. I need to fabricate a new event cover for the top here. Whatever's happened to that originally, I don't know. And I've been in contact with the original kit manufacturer, who's given me some advice on what I can do there, and I should also have another set of handrails to go in shortly too. Now I touched on the performance of the engine. She runs very well, actually. She runs very well with the DCC chip in. It's just a standard DCC. It's fitted with a chip which is rated up to 2 amps, I think. So it's a little bit more beefier than your standard arrow gauge chip. However, the other locomotives that have the Ixion and the Dapple 08, they both run quite well with just a normal arrow gauge chip. So I have actually had this up to speed on the rolling road. Very smooth in both directions. So going back to the actual original design of the real thing. Now, it had a bit of an Achilles heel with how the turbine was designed. It was only designed to go in one direction, so it was designed to go forward. Now that's absolutely fine, but to get it to go backwards, it had to have another turbine to drive it in the other direction. Now that's fine, but with the space available, it was only a small turbine, so it was more or less just enough to move the locomotive itself. It couldn't really pull a train in reverse. It was enough to move it from the shed and maybe shunt it about a bit, but it would have to be turned to be faced forward to go on any kind of express run. Now I believe the actual I have only briefly read my book I've got on it. I actually bought the LMS Turbomotive from Evolution to Legacy by Jeremy Clements and Kevin Robertson. Now you'll see on the other side there is actually a slight difference in how the engine looks. So just have a quick flick through this. Obviously I can't show you too much, but it goes on about other experiments with LMS locomotives and other sort of steam turbine driven things like the Kidston Still petrol diesel and everything like that, and experiments in America, and of course the eventual rebuild and the actual crash, because this locomotive, when it was rebuilt as 46202 Princess Anne, the most notable changes was the boiler stayed the same, but it was actually fitted with new frames which were, I believe, either designed on and based on or from a Duchess. So it has the much more notable higher running plate of the Duchess locomotive. But Princess Anne, as it was then known, was then involved in the Harrow and Wealdstone crash. So there's very actual few photos of it in existence. And by then it had British Railways green with the early crest on it. Now, talking on livery, my intention is, once this is all closer to being complete, is to do this in the LMS lined livery. Going into liveries, this is the first livery which she would have been in. Now, later on in life, towards the end of her career as a Turbomotive. She was painted during the war into LMS black. I believe it was LMS line black, in fact. So very similar to what a black 5 would have. So it'd been black all over with the sort of, I believe it was it a red and white or a white lining, with of course LMS on the tender. That was changed in 1948 to British Railways, and I believe in 1948, or perhaps even earlier, she acquired 2 smoke deflectors. Now I'll see if I can find a picture of what she looked like with those smoke deflectors. I'd be interested to know how much of a difference this made. There we go. So that's how she looked with the smoke deflectors. The other notable thing with this is it had a double chimney. So yes, this is the LMS Turbomotive. I believe it's from a Comet kit. So it's pretty heavy, so I'm going to try and pick it up now so you can have a quick look at what's underneath. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, the locomotive and tender are permanently connected, so it's a bit cumbersome to lift, but there we go. Alright, so I mentioned that I've fitted it with a DCC chip. This is all etched brass underneath. The tender wheels, they're the 2 end ones are fixed, and the middle one is it drops, so it's not sprung, but it's just by gravity it will drop to the track, so it can go over bumps very smoothly. Of course, the rear, I don't know what the LMS would have called it, the Cartazzi, I suppose. That's just sort of running free. It will just dangle and it will follow the contours of the track. Now, the driving wheels, the rear one is fixed, but the front 2 are actually sprung. Now, this helps in 2 ways. It helps negotiate across any sort of bumps and things a bit smoother, and it also assists with holding the wheels down to the track with the weight of the locomotive on top to improve the pickup, because the pickups are only on the 6 driving wheels. And of course, there is the front pony. Now, there's one thing which this model can't do, and that is it won't negotiate the Pico set track curves, which is what I have got. So all the 060s which I have, those are fine, but this just won't give. It doesn't have enough give in it. The driving wheels will just about negotiate it, but there's not enough side play here to be able to go around those corners, which is a shame really, as she is quite a good runner. And I also mentioned that the other side is remarkably different, so we'll just put this back on the track where she should be, as where any engine should be. Now, I believe on this side, I don't know for sure, so I'd stand to be corrected, that this was all contained piping to do with the turbine drive, because she's left-hand drive as well, so I'd imagine it's got some kind of control apparatus underneath. Other than that, the other side's pretty much the same, just this bulbous strip, which is basically like a cladding to cover essentially. Now, moving back along the engine, and now I've got it around on this side, so see if I can move it forward a little. She's in fact very smooth as well. So looking at the back, it does actually have real coal in the tender, which gives it quite a lot of weight, which is going to be good for the loads that this can pull, because you don't want a light tender and a heavy load, because the heavy load will be able to pull that off the track. Not really much else to add about this engine. The cab detail needs a little bit of work on it as well, but it's a nice little sort of odd showpiece, I'd say. It'll be nice to get it on a layout one day and see if we can get it to do what it's supposed to do, really. So let's just I can only run this on the straight bit of track, so let's just have a few sort of passing shots, I suppose.